Sarah Chen adjusted her simple black dress one more time before stepping out of the taxi. The Grand Metropole Hotel towered above her, its golden lights casting long shadows on the red carpet below. Tonight was the annual Businesswoman of the Year Gala, and she had been invited as a finalist. At 28, she was the youngest person ever nominated for the award. As she walked toward the entrance, Sarah couldn't help but feel out of place. Her dress was elegant but modest, purchased from a department store rather than a designer boutique. Her jewelry was minimal, just small pearl earrings that belonged to her grandmother. She carried a simple clutch that held her phone, some cash, and the invitation that had changed everything. The doorman smiled politely as he opened the heavy glass doors. Inside, the ballroom was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen fireworks, casting rainbow patterns across the marble floors. Round tables draped in white silk filled the space, each decorated with towering arrangements of white roses and baby's breath. Sarah checked in at the registration desk, where a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair handed her a name tag and pointed toward the cocktail reception area. She took a deep breath and walked into the crowd of well-dressed business leaders, politicians, and socialites. The other attendees moved through the room with confidence that came from years of attending such events. Women wore designer gowns that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent, their wrists adorned with diamond bracelets that caught the light with every gesture. Men in perfectly tailored tuxedos discussed deals worth millions while sipping champagne that cost more per bottle than most people made in a week. Sarah found herself standing near the bar, observing the social dynamics around her. She had built her tech company from nothing, working 18-hour days in a cramped apartment for 3 years. Her software solution for supply chain optimization had caught the attention of major corporations, and her revenue had grown from $0 to $50 million in just 2 years. Yet standing in this room, she felt like an outsider looking in. A waiter approached with a tray of champagne flutes. Sarah took one and nodded her thanks. The champagne was smooth and expensive, nothing like the sparkling wine she usually bought for celebrations. She sipped it slowly while watching the crowd, trying to identify faces she had seen in business magazines. Near the center of the room, she spotted Victoria Ashworth, the CEO of Ashworth Industries, one of the largest manufacturing conglomerates in the country. Victoria was holding court with a small group of admirers, her silver hair swept into an elegant updo, her navy blue gown clearly custom-made. She wore a necklace of sapphires that probably cost more than most people's houses. Sarah had hoped to speak with Victoria tonight. Her company had developed a revolutionary inventory management system that could save Ashworth Industries millions of dollars annually while reducing waste by 40%. She had sent numerous emails and proposals through official channels, but they had all disappeared into the corporate bureaucracy without response. As Sarah worked up the courage to approach Victoria's group, she overheard snippets of conversation from nearby clusters of guests. They discussed vacation homes in the Hamptons, private jet schedules, and charitable foundations with budgets larger than small countries' GDP. The casual mention of such wealth made Sarah acutely aware of her own modest background. She had grown up in a small apartment above her parents' restaurant, where she learned the value of hard work by helping serve customers and balance books from the age of 12. Her parents had immigrated with nothing but determination and a dream of building something better for their children. They sacrificed everything to send Sarah to college, working double shifts and saving every penny. After graduation, Sarah had worked for 3 different tech companies, learning everything she could about software development, business operations, and customer relations. She saved aggressively, living on ramen noodles and sharing apartments with roommates, all while developing her business idea during nights and weekends. When she finally launched her company, Sarah had exactly $8,000 in savings and a laptop that crashed twice a day. She coded for 16 hours straight, survived on coffee and determination, and slowly built a client base of small businesses who couldn't afford enterprise-level solutions but desperately needed better inventory management. Her breakthrough came when a mid-sized retailer implemented her system and saw immediate results. Word spread through industry networks and larger companies began taking notice. Within 18 months, Sarah had hired 12 employees and moved into a proper office space. The growth was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. Now, standing in this opulent ballroom, surrounded by people who had been born into wealth or built empires over decades, Sarah felt the weight of her journey. Every person in this room had achieved something significant, but she wondered how many of them remembered what it felt like to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. The announcement came that dinner would be served shortly, and guests began moving toward their assigned tables. Sarah checked her table number against the seating chart near the entrance. Table 15 was toward the back of the room, filled with other finalists and young entrepreneurs who hadn't yet established themselves in the upper echelons of business society. As she made her way to her seat, Sarah passed table 1, where Victoria Ashworth sat with 7 other titans of industry. Their conversation paused as Sarah walked by, and she felt their eyes following her. She heard someone make a comment about newcomers and participation trophies, followed by polite laughter. Sarah's cheeks burned, but she kept walking with her head held high. She had learned long ago that success spoke louder than expensive clothes or inherited connections. Her company's results were solid, her team was brilliant, and her vision for the future was clear. At table 15, she found herself seated next to Marcus Rivera, a fellow entrepreneur who had built a successful renewable energy consulting firm, and Dr. Amanda Foster, who had developed breakthrough medical devices for rural healthcare. The conversation was stimulating and genuine, focused on challenges, innovations, and the excitement of building something meaningful from nothing. As the first course was served, Sarah felt her confidence returning. She belonged here not because of her dress or her connections, but because of what she had accomplished. Tonight was just the beginning of what she planned to achieve. The dinner progressed through multiple courses, each more elaborate than the last. Sarah found herself enjoying the company at her table more than she had expected. Marcus shared stories about installing solar panels in remote villages, while Dr. Foster explained how her portable diagnostic equipment was saving lives in areas without proper medical facilities. Their passion for their work reminded Sarah why she had started her own company. Between courses, guests mingled and networked throughout the ballroom. Sarah noticed how conversations shifted when certain people approached different groups. The established billionaires commanded immediate attention and respect, while younger entrepreneurs like herself often found themselves politely dismissed or relegated to brief, superficial exchanges. During one such break, Sarah decided it was time to approach Victoria Ashworth. She had practiced her elevator pitch dozens of times, refining it until she could explain her company's value proposition in under 2 minutes. This might be her only chance to speak directly with someone who could transform her business overnight. Victoria was standing near the dessert station with 3 other women, all of whom Sarah recognized from Forbes magazine covers. As Sarah approached the group, their conversation seemed to pause. Victoria turned toward her with a polite but distant smile. "Excuse me, Ms. Ashworth," Sarah began, her voice steady despite her racing heartbeat. "I'm Sarah Chen from Optimal Flow Solutions. I've been hoping to speak with you about a partnership opportunity that could significantly benefit Ashworth Industries." Victoria's expression didn't change, but Sarah caught the subtle glance she exchanged with the woman beside her. "Oh, Optimal Flow," Victoria said, in a tone that suggested she was trying to place the name. "That's the little inventory software company, isn't it?" Sarah felt the dismissive weight of the word little, but she pressed forward. "We've developed a revolutionary supply chain optimization system that's already helping companies reduce waste by up to 40% while cutting operational costs by millions annually. Our analysis shows that Ashworth Industries could save approximately $5 billion over 5 years with our implementation." One of the other women in the group, Helena Morrison from Morrison Global, laughed softly. $5 billion? That's quite a claim for such a young company. Her tone carried the kind of condescension that Sarah had encountered before, the assumption that age and inexperience automatically meant exaggeration. "I understand it sounds ambitious," Sarah replied, maintaining her professional composure. "But our data is based on comprehensive analysis of your supply chain patterns, inventory turnover rates, and current waste metrics. We've achieved similar results with other large-scale operations." Victoria sipped her champagne and studied Sarah, with the calculating gaze of someone who had built an empire through shrewd decision-making. Tell me, Sarah, how many Fortune 500 companies are currently using your system? Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest. This was always the challenge for growing companies, the catch-22 of needing large clients to attract large clients. We're currently working with several mid-sized corporations and have proven our effectiveness across various industries. Our technology scales seamlessly, and our results speak for themselves. Mid-sized corporations, repeated another woman in the group, Elizabeth Sterling from Sterling Enterprises. So, no Fortune 500 companies then? It wasn't a question, and the way she said it made Sarah's achievements sound insignificant. Sarah could feel the conversation slipping away from her, but she tried one more approach. What matters isn't the size of our current clients, but the proven results and the massive potential for companies like yours. We're not just another software vendor. We're offering a strategic partnership that could revolutionize how Ashworth Industries manages its entire supply chain. Victoria exchanged another look with her companions, and Sarah caught the subtle eye roll from Helena. "Sarah, dear," Victoria said, her voice taking on a patronizing tone that made Sarah's stomach clench. "You seem very enthusiastic about your little project, but Ashworth Industries works with established partners, companies with track records and proven stability. Our track record shows consistent growth and measurable results," Sarah insisted. But she could sense the dismissal coming before Victoria spoke again. "I'm sure you've had some success with smaller businesses," Victoria continued, her smile becoming more condescending. "But there's a significant difference between helping a small retailer organize their stockroom and managing the complex supply chains of a global corporation. Perhaps you should focus on companies more suited to your current capabilities." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. The casual dismissal of everything she had worked for, the reduction of her innovative technology to organizing stockrooms, and the implication that she should know her place stung more than she wanted to admit. Helena leaned forward slightly, her voice carrying clearly to others nearby. "It's admirable how optimistic young entrepreneurs can be. Though I do wonder sometimes if business schools are teaching realistic expectations these days." Several people within earshot turned to look at the exchange. Sarah felt heat rising in her cheeks as she realized they were becoming a spectacle. The conversation had shifted from business discussion to something that felt more like public entertainment for the established elite. Elizabeth Sterling added her own observation. "There's something to be said for understanding market hierarchy. Not everyone can play in the same league, and there's no shame in that." Sarah looked around the small crowd that had gathered, drawn by the obvious tension. Some faces showed curiosity. Others displayed the kind of polite discomfort that comes from witnessing someone being put in their place. A few seemed to be enjoying the show. "I think there might be some misunderstanding about our capabilities." Sarah tried once more, but Victoria was already turning away. "It was lovely meeting you, Sarah," Victoria said over her shoulder. "Enjoy the rest of your evening." The dismissal was complete and public. Sarah stood there for a moment, feeling the eyes of the bystanders on her. Some looked sympathetic, others seemed amused by what they had witnessed. The message was clear. She had overreached, presumed to belong in a conversation above her station, and been appropriately corrected. Sarah managed a polite nod and walked away with as much dignity as she could muster. Her face burned with embarrassment and anger, but she kept her expression neutral. The rejection itself wasn't unexpected. She had faced plenty of those in her business career. But the public nature of it, the condescending tone, and the implication that she should be grateful for whatever scraps larger companies might throw her way, ignited something deeper inside her. As she made her way back to her table, Sarah's mind began working differently. The hurt was real, but underneath it was a growing determination. She had built her company by proving doubters wrong, by finding ways to succeed when others said it was impossible. This public dismissal wasn't the end of anything. It was fuel for what came next. Sarah returned to her table, her mind racing despite her outward composure. Marcus and Dr. Foster immediately noticed her tense expression, but they were tactful enough not to ask direct questions. Instead, Marcus launched into a story about his most difficult client negotiation, which helped Sarah regain her equilibrium without having to discuss what had just happened. As the evening's program began, Sarah found herself studying Victoria Ashworth with new intensity. The older woman commanded attention effortlessly, her presence dominating whatever conversation she joined. When Victoria rose to present one of the evening's awards, the entire room fell silent, with respectful attention. "Success in business," Victoria announced from the podium, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system, "requires more than good intentions and enthusiasm. It demands experience, proven results, and the wisdom to understand one's place in the marketplace hierarchy." Sarah felt the words like arrows aimed directly at her. Though she knew Victoria was speaking to the entire audience, several heads turned in her direction, and she realized that their earlier exchange had become gossip fodder for much of the room. "We must be careful," Victoria continued, "not to confuse potential with achievement or ambition with capability. The business world has no participation trophies, only results that matter." The applause was enthusiastic, and Sarah noticed that some people were looking at her while clapping, their expressions ranging from sympathetic to smugly satisfied. She maintained her composure, even managing a polite smile, but inside she was cataloging every slight, every condescending look, every whispered comment she caught from nearby tables. When the formal program ended and guests began mingling again, Sarah found herself observing the social dynamics with the analytical mind that had built her business. She watched how information flowed through the crowd, how alliances formed and dissolved over champagne and small talk, how deals worth millions were discussed as casually as weekend plans. Near the bar, she overheard Victoria speaking with a group of investors about Ashworth Industries' upcoming quarterly projections. They were concerned about rising operational costs and supply chain inefficiencies. Victoria dismissed these concerns with confident assurances that their established systems would weather any challenges. Sarah listened carefully, her business mind automatically calculating the gaps between Victoria's public confidence and the underlying problems she was describing. Every challenge Victoria mentioned was exactly the type of issue that Optimal Flow's system was designed to solve. Later in the evening, as guests began to leave, Sarah approached the hotel's business center. She had work to do and it couldn't wait until morning. Using her laptop, she accessed Optimal Flow's analysis servers and began pulling together every piece of data she had collected about Ashworth Industries over the past year. Her team had been thorough in their research, gathering public financial reports, industry analyses, supplier information, and operational data that was available through various business intelligence sources. Sarah had always believed in understanding potential clients completely before approaching them, and that preparation was about to pay off in ways she had never imagined. Working through the night in her hotel room, Sarah constructed the most comprehensive business analysis she had ever created. She modeled Ashworth Industries' entire supply chain, identified inefficiencies, calculated waste patterns, and projected the exact financial impact of implementing Optimal Flow's solutions. The numbers were even more impressive than she had realized. During her brief pitch to Victoria, Ashworth Industries was hemorrhaging money through outdated inventory management, inefficient supplier relationships, and logistics coordination that belonged in the previous decade. The $5 billion in potential savings over 5 years was actually conservative. But Sarah's analysis went deeper than just identifying problems. She created detailed implementation timelines, risk assessments, and transition strategies that would minimize disruption while maximizing benefits. She identified specific facilities where pilot programs could demonstrate immediate results, and she mapped out a rollout strategy that could transform the entire corporation within 18 months. As dawn broke over the city, Sarah sat back and reviewed her work. She had created something that went far beyond a typical business proposal. This was a complete roadmap for transforming one of the country's largest corporations, backed by data that Victoria's own finance team would have to acknowledge. But Sarah knew that simply sending another proposal through official channels would result in the same dismissive treatment she had received before. She needed a different approach, something that would force Victoria and her board to pay attention. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from her business partner and best friend, Jamie Park, who had been monitoring social media mentions of the gala. "Saw some posts about last night, you okay?" Instead of responding immediately, Sarah called Jamie directly. Despite the early hour, Jamie answered on the second ring. Sarah? What happened? Instagram is full of pictures from that gala, and I saw some comments that looked pretty brutal. Sarah filled Jamie in on the evening's events, describing Victoria's public dismissal and the condescending treatment she had received. As she spoke, her anger reignited, but it was a cold, calculated anger now, rather than the hot embarrassment she had felt during the encounter. So what's the plan? Jamie asked, knowing Sarah well enough to understand that she wouldn't simply accept defeat. I've been working all night on something, Sarah said, looking at her laptop screen. I have everything we need to prove that Victoria Ashworth made the biggest mistake of her career last night. What do you mean? Sarah began explaining her analysis, describing the massive inefficiencies she had identified in Ashworth Industries' operations and the transformation that Optimal Flow could deliver. Jamie listened quietly, occasionally asking technical questions about the data sources and methodology. This is solid work, Sarah, but how do you plan to get their attention? They've already shown they won't take meetings with you. Sarah smiled for the first time since the previous evening. That's where it gets interesting. Victoria's dismissal last night wasn't just rude, it was a strategic error that created an opportunity for us. How so? She made her position very public. Everyone at that gala heard her dismiss our company as insignificant. Her reputation is now tied to being right about that assessment. If we can prove her wrong in an equally public way, the impact will be exponential. Jamie was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. What exactly are you thinking? I'm thinking, Sarah said, her voice gaining strength with each word, that it's time to show Victoria Ashworth and everyone else in that ballroom exactly what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. Sarah, be careful. These people have power and connections that could make our lives very difficult if we handle this wrong. Sarah understood Jamie's concern, but she also knew that playing it safe had never gotten her anywhere. Every major breakthrough in her career had come from taking calculated risks that others considered too dangerous or too ambitious. I'm not planning to do anything reckless, Sarah assured her friend. But I'm not going to let them dismiss us without consequences, either. By the time I'm finished, Victoria Ashworth is going to regret every word she said last night. Over the following weeks, Sarah executed her plan with methodical precision. She knew that confronting Victoria directly would accomplish nothing, but there were other ways to get the attention of corporate decision-makers. The key was creating a situation where ignoring Optimal Flow would cost more than engaging with them. Sarah began by reaching out to Ashworth Industries' competitors, particularly companies that had been losing market share to Victoria's corporation. Her comprehensive analysis had revealed not only Ashworth's weaknesses, but also opportunities for their rivals to exploit those vulnerabilities. Her first meeting was with David Chen, CEO of Pacific Manufacturing, one of Ashworth's primary competitors. Pacific had been struggling to match Ashworth's pricing while maintaining quality, and Sarah's analysis showed exactly why they were at a disadvantage. Your operational costs are 12% higher than they need to be, Sarah explained, presenting her findings in David's conference room. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is that Ashworth Industries' costs are 23% higher than optimal. They're just better at absorbing those inefficiencies because of their size. David leaned forward, studying the detailed chart Sarah had prepared. You're saying that if we implement your system, we could underprice them while improving our margins? Exactly. And with their current operational structure, they can't respond quickly enough to match your pricing without taking massive losses. Within 2 weeks, Pacific Manufacturing signed a comprehensive deal with Optimal Flow. Sarah's team worked around the clock to implement the system, knowing that rapid results were essential to her larger strategy. The partnership exceeded every projected outcome, with Pacific achieving a 15% reduction in operational costs within the first month. Sarah then approached 2 more of Ashworth's competitors with similar proposals. She wasn't just selling software solutions. She was orchestrating a coordinated assault on Victoria's market position, using her own company's inefficiencies as weapons. As Pacific Manufacturing began aggressively undercutting Ashworth's pricing, on major contracts, Victoria's finance team started asking uncomfortable questions. Sarah had predicted this reaction and was prepared for the next phase of her plan. Sarah contacted business journalists at major publications, offering them exclusive access to a story about how innovative technology was disrupting traditional manufacturing hierarchies. She positioned the narrative around small, agile companies using advanced analytics to outmaneuver established corporations that had become complacent about their market positions. The first article appeared in Business Weekly under the headline David versus Goliath: How Smart Analytics Are Leveling the Corporate Playing Field. The piece featured Pacific Manufacturing's remarkable turnaround and their new competitive advantage against larger rivals. While Sarah made sure optimal flow wasn't the main focus, the company was prominently mentioned as the technology partner that had made the transformation possible. Victoria's response was swift and predictable. Ashworth Industries' PR team issued statements dismissing the competitive threat and emphasizing their company's stability and market leadership. Victoria herself was quoted in the business press describing the recent market disruption as temporary noise from companies that don't understand the complexities of sustained success. Sarah read Victoria's quotes with satisfaction. The older woman was doing exactly what Sarah had hoped she would do, doubling down on her dismissive attitude rather than investigating the actual threat. Pride was making Victoria blind to the strategic danger she was facing. The next phase required patience and precise timing. Sarah knew that Ashworth Industries would eventually be forced to respond to their deteriorating competitive position. And when they did, she needed to be ready with an offer they couldn't ignore. That opportunity came sooner than expected. A mutual contact in the industry mentioned that Ashworth Industries was quietly looking for efficiency consultants to help address some operational optimization challenges. The company was trying to solve their problems without admitting the severity of their situation, which created exactly the opening Sarah needed. Instead of approaching Ashworth directly, Sarah arranged for a respected business consulting firm to present optimal flows analysis as part of their own comprehensive assessment. The consulting firm, Parker & Associates, had worked with Ashworth before and had the credibility to get their findings in front of senior management. Sarah spent 3 days with Parker's team, helping them understand the full scope of optimal flows, capabilities, and the specific applications for Ashworth Industries. The consulting firm was impressed enough to stake their own reputation on the recommendations, which would carry significantly more weight than anything coming directly from Sarah's company. 2 weeks later, Sarah received a call from Michael, Parker himself. "Sarah, I've got news from the Ashworth presentation. Their CFO wants to schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss implementation details. They're trying to move quickly on this." "What was their reaction to the analysis?" Sarah asked. "Shock, mainly. They had no idea how much money they were leaving on the table. Their own finance team confirmed our numbers, and their operations people are excited about the potential improvements. But there's one complication." "Which is?" "Victoria Ashworth wasn't in the meeting. She's been traveling, and they want to move forward without waiting for her return. The CFO mentioned that they're facing some urgent competitive pressures and can't afford to delay." Sarah smiled. This was better than she had hoped. Victoria's absence meant that the initial negotiations would happen without her personal bias against optimal flow influencing the discussion. By the time Victoria returned and discovered what was happening, the business case would be so compelling that opposing it would be professionally damaging. "There's one more thing," Michael continued. "They want to start with a pilot program at their 3 largest distribution centers. If that goes well, they're talking about a full rollout across all operations. Sarah, this could be worth $50 million in the first year alone." As Sarah hung up the phone, she reflected on how dramatically things had changed since that humiliating evening at the Gala. Victoria's public dismissal had wounded her pride, but it had also motivated her to think bigger and more strategically than she ever had before. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah that Victoria's condescending attitude had actually created the perfect conditions for optimal flow's breakthrough. If Victoria had treated her with basic professional respect, Sarah would have been satisfied with a smaller partnership or even a polite rejection. Instead, the public humiliation had pushed Sarah to pursue a complete market disruption that would transform her company overnight. Jamie called that evening to discuss the logistical challenges of scaling up their operations to handle the Ashworth contract. "Are we sure we're ready for this?" Jamie asked. "This is about 10 times larger than anything we've handled before." "We'll be ready," Sarah assured her. "I've been planning for this opportunity since the night Victoria told me to know my place. We're going to show her and everyone else exactly what our place is." As she prepared for the upcoming negotiations, Sarah couldn't help but anticipate Victoria's reaction when she discovered that the little software company she had dismissed so publicly was about to become Ashworth Industries' most important strategic partner. The woman who had suggested Sarah should focus on companies more suited to her current capabilities was about to learn what those capabilities actually were. The pilot program launch exceeded every expectation Sarah had dared to set. Within 6 weeks of implementation at Ashworth Industries' 3 distribution centers, the results were undeniable. Operational efficiency improved by 18%, inventory waste dropped by 32%, and logistics coordination reached levels that their internal teams had considered impossible. Robert Martinez, Ashworth's chief financial officer, called Sarah personally to discuss expanding the program. "Sarah, I've been in this business for 25 years. And I've never seen improvements this dramatic this quickly. Our board is asking how soon we can roll this out company-wide." "We can have implementation teams ready within 2 weeks," Sarah replied, though internally she was scrambling to figure out how to scale their operations fast enough. "Our analysis suggests that full deployment across all Ashworth facilities could be completed within 8 months. 8 months is too long. We're losing market share every day we don't have this advantage. What would it take to cut that timeline in half?" Sarah took a deep breath. This was the moment that would either make or break her company. "If we're talking about a 4-month timeline, we would need to bring in additional development teams and dedicate our entire operational capacity to your project. That level of commitment would require a different kind of partnership agreement." "What kind of partnership are you thinking?" Sarah had been preparing for this conversation since the pilot program began. "A 5-year exclusive contract for supply, chain optimization across all Ashworth operations, with performance guarantees and revenue sharing based on measurable improvements. The total value would be approximately $200 million over the contract period." The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that Sarah wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Robert spoke again. "$200 million is a significant investment. I'll need to present this to our executive committee, but based on what we've seen so far, I think we can make this work." 3 days later, Sarah found herself in the executive boardroom at Ashworth Industries headquarters, presenting to the senior leadership team. The room was intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, a conference table that could seat 20 people, and walls lined with awards and photographs documenting the company's 60-year history. Robert Martinez made the introductions, and Sarah was surprised by the enthusiasm of the executive team. These were seasoned business leaders who had built one of the country's largest corporations, and they were treating her with the respect she had been seeking for years. "Ms. Chen," said Patricia Wong, the chief operating officer, "your system has accomplished something we've been trying to achieve for over a decade. Our warehouse managers are telling me this is the most significant operational improvement they've ever seen." As Sarah presented the details of the company-wide implementation plan, she noticed one empty chair at the head of the table. Victoria Ashworth was still traveling, and her absence created an interesting dynamic in the room. Without her potentially negative influence, the other executives were free to evaluate Optimal Flow's proposal purely on its business merits. The presentation lasted 2 hours, with detailed questions about technical capabilities, implementation timelines, and long-term support structures. Sarah answered every question with confidence backed by months of preparation. When she finished, the room fell silent as the executives absorbed the scope of what she was proposing. "This is exactly what we need," declared James Harrison, the Vice President of Operations. "Our competitive position has been eroding for months, and this gives us the tools to not just recover, but to dominate our market." Robert nodded in agreement. "The financial projections are compelling. Even if we only achieve half of the projected savings, this pays for itself within the first 18 months. Patricia leaned forward. My concern is timeline. Can your company really deliver on a 4-month implementation across 47 facilities? Sarah had been honest about the challenges, but she had also spent weeks developing contingency plans. It will require us to expand our team by 300% and establish dedicated project management offices in 6 regions. It's ambitious, but our analysis shows it's achievable with proper resource allocation. What kind of guarantees are you offering? Asked David Kim, the general counsel. Full performance guarantees with penalty clauses if we don't meet the specified efficiency improvements. Plus, we're willing to structure the payment schedule so that 60% of our fees are contingent on achieving measurable results. The executives exchanged glances that Sarah had learned to recognize as positive signs. These were people who understood risk and reward, and her willingness to tie optimal flow's compensation to actual results demonstrated confidence in her system's capabilities. I think we're ready to move forward, Robert announced. Obviously, we'll need final approval from Victoria when she returns next week, but this has my full support. As Sarah left the Ashworth headquarters that afternoon, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that she hadn't experienced since launching her company. Everything she had worked for was about to become reality, but she knew the biggest challenge was still ahead. Victoria Ashworth would return to discover that the little software company she had publicly dismissed was now positioned to become her corporation's most critical strategic partner. Sarah had no illusions about how Victoria would react to this development, especially given the very public nature of their previous encounter. That evening, Sarah called an emergency meeting with her entire team. In the Optimal Flow conference room, she explained the magnitude of the opportunity they were facing and the challenges that came with it. This contract will transform our company overnight, Sarah told her 12 employees. But it will also test every assumption we've made about our capabilities. We have 4 months to implement the most complex supply chain optimization project in our industry's history. Jamie raised the obvious concern. Sarah, we're talking about hiring 200 people in the next month. How do we maintain our company, culture and quality standards while scaling that rapidly? We don't compromise on either, Sarah replied. We hire the best people we can find, we train them intensively, and we create support structures that ensure success. This is our chance to prove that we belong in the same conversation as the major consulting firms and technology companies. Marcus Rivera, her head of development, looked concerned. What about the technical infrastructure? Our current systems weren't designed to handle projects of this scale. Sarah had been expecting this question. I've already spoken with 3 cloud computing providers about dedicated server capacity. We'll have the technical resources we need, but it will require rebuilding some of our core systems for enterprise-scale deployment. As the meeting continued, Sarah watched her team process the implications of what they were taking on. These people had joined Optimal Flow when it was still a startup working out of a cramped office space. Now they were being asked to compete with established corporations that had been doing large-scale implementations for decades. There's one more thing, Sarah said as the meeting was winding down. Victoria Ashworth, the CEO of our new client, is the same person who publicly dismissed our company at the business gala 6 weeks ago. When she returns and discovers what's happened, she's going to be less than pleased. We need to be prepared for significant resistance from the top of the organization. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Finally, Dr. Amanda Foster, who had joined the company after meeting Sarah at the gala, spoke up. So this is personal as well as professional? Sarah considered the question carefully before answering. It started as personal, but it's become something much bigger. This is about proving that innovation and results matter more than connections and established hierarchies. It's about showing that the future belongs to companies that adapt and improve, not those that rest on past success. Victoria Ashworth returned from her 3-week business trip to Europe, expecting to find her company operating exactly as she had left it. Instead, she walked into her executive suite to discover that her leadership team had committed to the EUIOE, largest technology partnership in Ashworth Industries history, without her input or approval. Robert Martinez was waiting in her office with a comprehensive briefing folder. knowing that delivering this news would require careful handling. Victoria's reputation for explosive reactions to surprises was legendary throughout the company. "Victoria, welcome back," Robert began cautiously. "We need to discuss some significant developments that occurred while you were away." Victoria settled into her chair and opened the briefing folder. As she read the executive summary, her expression shifted from curiosity to confusion to barely contained rage. "Optimal Flow Solutions," she read aloud. "Isn't this the insignificant little company from that gala?" "Actually, Victoria, they're not insignificant at all. Their pilot program has delivered results that exceed anything we've achieved with our current systems. The operational improvements are remarkable." Victoria's voice was dangerously calm. "Robert, please tell me that you did not commit this company to a $200 million contract with a startup that I personally dismissed as incompetent." "Victoria, you need to see the numbers. Their system has transformed our efficiency metrics at the pilot sites. We're saving money, reducing waste, and improving customer satisfaction simultaneously. The board is thrilled with the results." Victoria stood up and walked to her window, looking out over the city skyline that represented her corporate domain. "Do you have any idea how this makes me look? 6 weeks ago, I publicly stated that this company wasn't ready for enterprise-level work. Now my own leadership team is telling me they're our salvation." "The business case is solid, Victoria. This isn't about personalities or past conversations. This is about what's best for Ashworth Industries." Victoria turned back to face Robert, her expression hard. "Everything in business is about personalities and relationships, Robert. Credibility and reputation matter. If I allow this partnership to proceed, I'm admitting that my judgment was wrong in front of everyone who witnessed that gala conversation. With respect, Victoria, your judgment was based on limited information. Now we have comprehensive data showing exactly what Optimal Flow can deliver." The intercom on Victoria's desk buzzed. "Ms. Ashworth, the Wall Street Journal is online too. They're asking for comment about the Ashworth Optimal Flow partnership announcement." Victoria's face went pale. "What announcement?" Robert winced. "The business press picked up the story yesterday. Industry analysts are calling it a major strategic shift for us, and Optimal Flow's stock price has tripled since the news broke." Victoria grabbed the phone. "This is Victoria Ashworth. What exactly are you reporting about my company?" The conversation that followed was brief and one-sided. Victoria listened with growing fury as the journalist explained that the business community was buzzing about how a young tech company had secured a massive contract with one of the most established corporations in the industry. When Victoria hung up, her voice was ice cold. "Cancel the contract, Robert. Find a way to back out of this partnership immediately." "Victoria, we can't do that. We've signed preliminary agreements, and backing out now would expose us to massive legal liability. Plus, our competitors are already responding to news of our efficiency improvements. If we cancel this project, we'll be fighting a battle on two fronts." Victoria walked back to her desk and studied the financial projections in the briefing folder. Despite her anger, she was too experienced a businesswoman to ignore compelling numbers. The projected savings were enormous, and the competitive advantages were exactly what Ashworth Industries needed to maintain market leadership. "Get Sarah Chen on the phone," Victoria said finally. "If I'm going to be forced into this partnership, I want to make sure she understands exactly who is in charge." 30 minutes later, Sarah was sitting in Victoria's office facing the woman who had humiliated her at the gala. The power dynamic had shifted dramatically since their last encounter, but Sarah knew that Victoria still held considerable influence over the partnership's success or failure. "Ms. Chen," Victoria began, her tone formal and cold, "I understand that you've managed to convince my team that your company is indispensable to our operations." Sarah kept her voice steady and professional. "Ms. Ashworth, our pilot program results speak for themselves. We've delivered exactly what we promised, and we're prepared to extend those improvements across your entire operation." "Let me be very clear about something," Victoria continued. "I was not consulted about this partnership, and I have serious reservations about working with a company that lacks proven experience at this scale. However, my team seems convinced that the risk is worth taking." Sarah felt the familiar tension of being dismissed, but this time she had leverage. "I understand your concerns, Ms. Ashworth, but our results demonstrate that we're not the inexperienced startup you encountered at the gala. We've proven our capabilities with measurable outcomes." Victoria's expression hardened. "Don't mistake temporary success for permanent competence, Ms. Chen. Enterprise-level projects are complex, and many promising startups have failed when they tried to scale beyond their capabilities, which is why we've structured this partnership with performance guarantees and milestone-based payments," Sarah replied calmly. "We're not asking you to trust us based on promises. We're proving our value at every stage of implementation." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Victoria probing for weaknesses in Sarah's planning, and Sarah responding with detailed answers backed by comprehensive analysis. Despite Victoria's obvious reluctance, Sarah could see that the older woman was beginning to recognize the thoroughness of Optimal Flow's preparation. Finally, Victoria leaned back in her chair. "Ms. Chen, I'm going to be completely honest with you. This partnership puts me in an extremely difficult position. My reputation in this industry is built on making sound judgments about people and companies. If you succeed, it validates your capabilities but suggests my initial assessment was wrong. If you fail, it damages my company but proves I was right to be skeptical." Sarah had been expecting this conversation since learning about Victoria's return. "Ms. Ashworth, I understand the position you're in, but I think you're looking at this from the wrong angle. Your initial assessment was based on limited information about a company you had never worked with. Your current decision is based on proven results and comprehensive analysis. Both decisions can be correct, given the information available at the time." Victoria studied Sarah with new attention. "You're suggesting that I can support this partnership without admitting my initial judgment was wrong. I'm suggesting that good leaders adapt their positions when new information becomes available. The business world respects executives who can recognize opportunity, even when it comes from unexpected sources." For the first time since Sarah had entered the office, Victoria's expression softened slightly. "You've thought about this carefully, haven't you?" Sarah nodded. "I've thought about very little else since our conversation at the gala. Your dismissal motivated me to prove that Optimal Flow deserves a place in enterprise-level discussions. But I've also realized that success for both our companies requires cooperation, not conflict." Victoria was quiet for several minutes, processing the implications of what Sarah was offering. Finally, she spoke again. "Ms. Chen, if we proceed with this partnership, I need your assurance that you understand the stakes involved. This isn't just about software implementation. This is about the reputation and future of both our companies." Sarah met Victoria's gaze directly. "Ms. Ashworth, I understand exactly what's at stake. That's why I'm confident we'll succeed. Optimal Flow has never failed to deliver on our commitments, and we're not going to start with the most important contract in our company's history." Victoria stood up and extended her hand. "Then let's prove that sometimes the most unlikely partnerships produce the most remarkable results." As Sarah shook Victoria's hand, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The humiliation at the gala had been painful, but it had also ignited the determination that transformed her company from a promising startup into a major player in the enterprise software industry. 6 months later, when Ashworth Industries announced record efficiency improvements and cost savings that exceeded all projections, Victoria Ashworth publicly praised Optimal Flow as a strategic partner that had revolutionized their operations. At the next year's business gala, Sarah Chen was not only invited as a guest but as the keynote speaker. Standing at the podium where Victoria had once dismissed ambitious young entrepreneurs, Sarah looked out at an audience that now included many of the same people who had witnessed her public humiliation. But this time, when she spoke about the importance of recognizing potential regardless of its source, the entire room listened with respect. Victoria Ashworth, sitting at the head table, led the standing ovation that followed Sarah's speech. The woman who had once suggested that Sarah should know her place had learned that sometimes the most powerful place to be is wherever you choose to stand.